Welcome, everybody, to the 6th episode of the Dream Job Podcast. My name is Riley Warren, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Shannon Jacobs, and we are joined by two incredible guests today. To my left is Artist Relations Manager at Vic Firth and Zildjian, Mr. Brian Stockard, and sitting next to him is the Director of Education, Mr. Mark Wessels. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us on this early Sunday morning. I know we were sweating it out in the lot in San Antonio yesterday, and you guys are catching some footage of all the Vic Firth and Zildjian groups. Did we manage to get enough sleep and
never enough sleep? Never enough sleep.
Part of the dream job is the tan you get.
Yeah.
You know, like you just have to say
Sock tan, shirt.
You know, like from here down and
Right.
you know, like here down.
Yes. You never think I'm just gonna throw the shirt off and just make the whole get the whole.
Yeah.
lines.
I've done it, but you know,
This year I
can clear a lot.
remember to take my sunglasses off.
That's good.
Because last year I came back very much a raccoon.
The owl, the
Not
owl
realizing-
look on
yeah,
you.
I mean, you think I want to have these on the whole day. It's so sunny, but then afterwards you regret it.
Yeah, you're like, oh
Luckily,
man.
I remember. At least I think. Maybe I have a raccoon tan right now.
No, you look good.
Solid now.
If you do, we'll just edit it out in post.
That's perfect.
We'll just make you look great. Well, we're super excited to have you guys, and some of our viewers may recognize we're not in our typical spot. We're, like we mentioned, we're on the road. We're taking this thing on tour a little bit, so we're down here in the beautiful city of San Antonio on an early Sunday morning, and just looking forward to catching up with you guys and hearing a little bit about your journeys and what led you to the really unique jobs that you guys both have in our profession. So we like to just kind of start with just giving you guys a chance to give us an overview of your journey in percussion. I know both of you were percussion teachers at one point in your careers, but just kind of talk about maybe Brian, we can start with you. Just what led you to become a percussionist? Kind of where did you grow up, and what path did you take to get you to the job you have now?
I started playing trumpet in elementary school.
Nice.
And I played that all the way through elementary, middle school, and freshman year of high school marching band.
Oh, wow.
But all my buddies were in the drum line, and I was jealous, and I thought everything they were doing was so cool, so I joined the drum line.
Wow.
And then so I played drums the rest of sophomore year through senior year.
Let the record show that a trumpet player was jealous of a drummer. I just want
right.
everyone on the podcast to know. I think that's super unique. So, okay, cool, great.
And then my high school drumline instructor, a guy named Dave Hinkle, was teaching local drum corps at the time,
Okay.
Pacific Crest.
Nice.
And so I auditioned, I got cut from Pacific Crest, and then they called me back saying, hey, we need someone to play tenors.
Cool.
So I marched 3 years at Pacific Crest, and then I went and aged out at the cadets.
Nice.
And that's my marching career.
Yeah.
I played guitar in jazz band and stuff like that, and I started drumming at theme parks and doing corporate gigs and
Cool.
touring with a group, and then after that, I was an old man at the ripe old age of 22, and I started teaching. So I was teaching drum lines and writing and just building all that up. When I had March Cadets, our two instructors, Tom Ungst, well, we had a lot of instructors, but
Sure.
the caption heads, Tom Ungst and Neil Larrabee, they talked about the Vic Firth education team.
Yeah.
And for those of us that were going to go on and teach, so I was really excited about that. So around 2001, 2, I got to look back, kind of forget, it's been so long now.
Right.
I joined the education team. And so I was able to stay in touch with the people at Vic and be part of that whole network.
Mm-hmm.
And over the next, 15 years or so, I was teaching and writing and taking groups at WGI, teaching drum corps. I taught Pacific Crest, taught United Percussion, taught cadets for a couple camps in 2008, and
Nice.
started writing for other groups. But I was always staying connected to the people at Vic Firth and all the incredible resources, which he can talk for many episodes about the stuff that
Right.
Mark has done. But like most of us, a lot of the stuff Mark did and everyone at Vic Firth did helped kind of guide me in my teaching with resources for students.
Yeah.
So I was always engaged with the company.
Yeah.
And that's the very, very quick version
Sure.
of, but that's how everything kind of got started. And, and then I was part of emails chains that were going out. And one day they sent one out saying, we're hiring.
Huh.
So I just pounced.
Wow.
And so here we are. And then the next significant thing that happened was I got interviewed for a podcast.
That doesn't happen.
So, Brian, talk a little bit about, you did give us a short version. Obviously, coming up from where you went to school and then doing the drumming at, did you drum at some Disney World stuff?
Never at
theme park?
Disney.
Okay.
Some friends and I saw an ad for, or I guess an advertisement at a mall in San Diego saying, "Hey, are you a performer?
Yeah.
Audition and we'll pay you to play at this mall."
Yeah.
Nice.
This outdoor mall in downtown San Diego. And so my buddies and I were like, we should come up with something. So me and two of the friends put together like this little drumming trio on bar stools and water bottles and pots and pans. And
Oh, nice.
that led to lots of gigging. And then we got hired to do corporate gigs and then theme parks. Or like, oh, you should do this at a theme park. And so we did Legoland and some SeaWorld stuff and did fairs and festivals. And then I moved. I was in a band that toured for a couple years based out of New Hampshire.
Oh, cool.
A band called Recycled Percussion. And they're still going strong. And I was in there for a couple years, and then I moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then I did some performing at Hershey Park for a couple years.
Nice.
Cool.
And then now I'm still involved in that a little bit. I do direct some theme park shows, and I still write for. I do a little bit of teaching.
Yeah.
This job's pretty demanding, so I'm not doing as much as I used to. But I'm still writing a little bit, writing for some indoor groups, and I wrote for a drum corps this summer.
Oh, wow.
For some marching bands. So yeah, kind of. Still staying in the mix,
That's awesome.
so.
Cool. And the high school you taught at in Pennsylvania for so long was Mechanicsburg?
Yeah, Mechanicsburg High School.
Very cool. How long were you teaching there?
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's actually really, not to jump around too much, but
Sure.
I got the job because I was able to get connected with the director there, percussion director there named Jim Weaver, a member of the Vic Firth education team.
Right.
So
There you go.
He also had March Cadets, but it was like, oh, you're on the ed team, so am I. And
Yeah.
we kind of had these connection points because we're part of that same network, and that kind of led to us being able to meet and him having, I guess you could say, we trusted each other right away.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd love to say it was all Vic Firth education team, but we had both March Cadets.
Sure.
So we both knew that we had done stuff at a high level, and we were both a little off our knocker, just a little.
As all drummers are, to some
so,
extent. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that
Yeah, of course.
backstory. And Mr. Wessels, we'll go over to you. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about your upbringing and background? Texas native here,
How much time do you have? I'm an old ass man.
I think there's an event we all have to get to at some point today. So, but no, please just, the viewers and the listeners want to know about you for sure. So.
Yeah, like most guys start off. My biggest brother was in a rock band.
Yeah.
And he played keys and sang, and they rehearsed at my house, and it was just like, I was a drummer from the time I remember. I was sitting behind the drum kit.
Nice.
Like playing on the drums when they weren't there, and getting in trouble for that kind of stuff. But I was really, really lucky that I grew up in San Angelo, Texas. And there was a guy who was teaching drums that I got hooked up with. He was going to college, Evelio Villarreal.
Okay.
Wound up being a fantastic instructor, as a young person, and then went and he started teaching at the high school after he graduated. And the band director was Ken and Wiley's dad, and Ken and Wiley and I went to school together. So
Nice.
we had a kind of a little hotbed of percussion going on at the high school that we were at.
Right.
Playing in a rock band, and Avilia was always constantly pushing us, the all-state music, the solo, the ensemble, that kind of stuff. So it was very typical what is happening now, but back then that was not typical. A percussion guy teaching at a high school and having regular lessons and activity stuff like that. So Ken's dad was way into drum corps. And this was back in the time when they only showed it one time. They only showed PBS.
Right.
On finals, they would do that. We'd have these huge parties where we'd all get together at the pizza place, and we'd have that kind of thing. But like every Friday, when he didn't want the brass players taxing their lips, he would plug in VHS tapes, and we would just watch drum corps.
Wow.
Put up an image of a VHS tape.
Right.
Yeah, you have to know what a VHS. I'm going to go back. 8 tracks. We're going to go back. But Carl Lowe. I don't know if you know Carl Lowe was really big, instrumental in the Odyssey, Winter Guard. Like, we had a few guys that went to Madison and tried out because Madison was, I don't know what the connection was, but there was just kind of like, well, that's just kind of where you go. So, there were like 4 of us from Texas who were in the percussion section. tried out, for Madison. Kenan went to Phantom, and I went to Madison, and, like drum corps kind of thing. You start meeting people, you start getting around, you seeing other things. So, like that developed. When I came back, I was still in college teaching at Lake Highlands High School, which was, early on there were only a few of us that were being paid to teach percussion.
Right.
Like Greg Reinhardt, who was at Lake Highlands before me, went to Westfield High School.
Yep.
So the whole thing just kind of developed through that, and then like I started teaching drum corps. I taught the Skyriders, which started off as kind of a multi-purpose tech, because they already had a snare tech, they already had the arranger and everything. I just kind of went, so went in there, and then pretty soon was a snare tech, and then pretty soon was a caption head, and pretty soon was writing.
Right.
So it's that path of just the next step.
Yeah.
Because
Working
it's
your way
always
up.
the next step. And then came back and. I taught at University of North Texas. Basically, I was the TA for the drumline, which didn't really want to be the TA for the drumline because it's like herding cats.
Yes.
Like the guys that are in that line are just super phenomenal percussionists and people, but really, really hard to get them all in a room together.
Yeah.
So Paul Rennick and Jeff Moore and Brian West, and I mean like just
Wow.
huge numbers of people who are like top of their game. Now
Legends
we're in the
now,
drum
yeah.
line, and I was having to go like, come on, get your drums on, let's go. Like I'm that guy. So
That's awesome.
And like as I started teaching, I was got hired. First I was just kind of teaching lessons, and then they would pay me to do the drum line and stuff at Lake Highlands. I got hired full time to be a band director, which is kind of unheard of back then at DeSoto. Like, okay, you are a band director, you have to teach the third band. But the rest of your day is percussion. And I was like, third band. Ooh. Clarinet class. Oh, God. But the rest of my day is percussion. So I did that. And then, and then a little bit of teaching at Plano. And then I had joined the Vic Firth education team.
Right.
Actually, I was one of the first members because Neil started, hey, I'm going to start this thing called... And I knew Neil because I started judging DCI, doing a little bit of that, so we kind of ran against each other a few times in the DCI judging community and stuff. And then, hey, I'm starting this new club called the Education Team, and it's like Lamar Burkhalter, and I mean, like, just really great educators from around the country. And it was like we would have this little seminar thing at PIS, just a round table of about 10 or 12 people. That was pretty much it. But a lot of volunteering of, hey, I'll write an article for your newsletter, or I'll do this kind of thing. I had started one of the first websites on this new thing they called the internet back then.
Yeah, I think it's important you talk about this. This is one where I kind of heard of Mark Wessels. Really, coming from where I came from was when you started all the online things. That was super instrumental in my middle school, high school upbringing.
Yeah, I mean and it's kind of the path of my life that this new thing comes out and I go like, what is that? I don't know anything about it. I mean, literally computers came out while I was teaching, and it was like, what is that? You could actually, I was writing everything by hand. It's like they have a program called Finale, And Finale 1.0, I spent $700 and bought Finale on my little MacBook that had, or MacBook, whatever it was, SE, that had a screen about that big, and I was doing the first generation of desktop publishing, and I wasn't really trying to publish. I just wanted, because my handwriting was so bad, I just wanted, to be able to lay that stuff out into a book. So I was doing that at the beginning of, the Apple desktop publishing
Apple
thing.
IIe. I'm sitting here trying to think of the name of the computer. Apple IIe. That's
Shout out Apple.
And then, and then this new internet thing came around, and it was like, wow, what is that? And I had a friend, Mike Myers, who used to teach at North Mesquite. He had like a website, and he goes, man, this is a great thing. You should get into this. And I was like, I don't know anything about that stuff. And then pretty soon I was buying books on learning how to code HTML, because back then you couldn't just drag and drop anything. It was just like, okay, if you wanted an image to appear, you had to like code it in.
Yeah.
And you had to say the sizes and everything. So I started thedrumclub.com.
Right.
Which was like, initially was just going to be a promotion for the couple of books that I've written, but it turned into like, like I was really good friends with Jeff Queen. It's like, hey, I have this, I have this dream of filming you playing the North Texas drum lick, and then I'll have the music on the, like you could download the music and back then it was filming something and then squashing it way down to like a 1 meg video.
Yeah.
That was the high quality. It had to be under a meg if it was, if you didn't want to crash people's computers. So, so I was doing all of that stuff, like really early on, and early adopter, not knowing anything about what I was doing. It's kind of like you guys,
right?
Basically, that's pretty much
exactly
as evidenced by the first attempt to record this episode. we are 100% in that camp for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, just the fear factor of not knowing and not thinking that I can do this. I didn't care. I didn't care what people thought about me. I didn't care about all I had is kind of a desire to do education and bring it to as many people as possible. So, early on recorded the rudiments, and early on had, play along MIDI files, and then had, world percussion stuff and drum set stuff. And anyway, caught the early on. God, man, this could go on all freaking day.
Keep going. This is great.
It's good. I've heard most of this.
Yeah.
But every time, it really is like when we go to the factory to watch cymbals made, or we go to the other factory and watch sticks and mallets made. You've seen 100 times, you're just enamored.
Yeah.
Like hearing all this, because I was like you. I was 15 years old. I was going to gridit.com.
Yeah. Yes.
And I was going to the drumclub.com, and I'd be like, ooh, there's a sound file of the Blue Knights. I'm going to press download. And then I'll go make a sandwich because it's going to take like 15 minutes to download.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back and listen to 20 seconds of drumming.
Yeah. No, but it was that, this was also the time where no companies had websites.
Yeah.
Right.
That just kind of wasn't a thing.
Sure.
And, I think a couple of companies started doing websites, and Vic decided we need a website. And it was just, at that time, it was like a place that you could go and see the sticks.
Yeah.
Not buy, not do anything else, but just see them.
Yeah.
And I guess they had hired a couple of high school kids that turned out a really, really terrible website. They did this presentation at PAS, and they had all of the education team in the room, and they had, this is our website, and they went around the room, and everybody talked about, oh, this is great, this is awesome. They got to me, and I went, yeah, it's good. And, kept going. And then at the end of the meeting, Vic Firth came out. Yeah, I didn't really know Vic. I met him a few times. But he came up, he goes, well, you were awfully silent about the website. Yeah. And I went, yeah, well, it's fine. It's good. And he goes, no, really, what do you really think? And I went, well, this is anybody that ever asked me, what do you really think? All right, get ready.
They're in for it.
Strap in, because this could be a minute.
Yeah.
He goes, well, I tell you what, I want you to come up to the suite, and I want to talk to you. And he came up and he goes, well, what's wrong with the website? I went, well, first of all, there's no reason for anybody to go and see a tip of a snare drum stick. I mean, why would you go to a website for that?
Right.
What you could do is this and this and this and this, and and I showed him my website because he had never seen it, and he went, what would you think about doing the Vic Firth website? And I went, yeah, maybe, whatever. I don't know how that could look. He goes, well, I tell you what, why don't you, I'll fly you up to Boston. I want you to kind of do a presentation for my team, because not everybody is, understanding what, and Vic he was not a computer guy. He just kind of knew that this was the next thing.
Yeah.
And so
visionary.
Over Christmas break, I redesigned the entire Vic Firth website.
Wow.
And I was going hey, this is my opportunity, and I flew up there, and I ported a bunch of the stuff that I have on Drum Club into, the shell of a Vic Firth thing, and I went up there and I did a presentation for, they had guys from the warehouse and Neil and Tracy and people. They were all sitting in a room, and I was showing them okay, here's what you could do to promote the sticks. Hey, like you could actually teach kids how to play the rudiments. You could teach kids this. You could teach, like you could do interviews. I did all of this stuff, and they kind of went, well, wait a minute. We need
hold your horses.
And then it was, they wound up offering me a job, and they said, well, do you want to be a paid contractor, or do you want to work for us? Because we could see you working for us. And I went, yeah, I'd love to work for Vic Firth.
Yeah.
How much does it pay? And it was like
Gotta pay the bills.
Immediately twice as much as I was making as a band director. It was
wow.
And it wouldn't be that now, but
Sure.
back then band directors were not paid much,
Right.
especially percussion guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then they asked me if I wanted to move to Boston, and I went, no.
Yeah, nope.
Yeah.
I
So,
love
I've
Boston,
been
but-
working from home. This whole remote work thing,
Yeah.
digital nomad, 2000,
Yeah.
year 2000.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
when I was doing that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the shortened story.
Well, tell them your job title for this thing they didn't understand, the internet.
Yeah, Vic was never really big into titles anyway, but he said, "What do you want your title to be?" And I went, I want to be the director of internet activities.
Nice. Internet activities.
I was thinking in my head, like, okay, I don't want to pigeonhole this. If I say that I'm the the education guy, then I can't do this. If I say this,
Right.
and I went, anything that happens on the internet.
Yes.
There you go.
I'm
Now
the
they call
director of.
that, what's Zach's title? Director of Digital Marketing.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they call it now.
Yeah.
Digital
marketing.
Nice.
But 23 years ago, internet was brand new.
It's brand new.
Crazy.
Yeah.
What do we call this?
Yeah,
I
I think
remember-
I just made that title up. I don't
love
think
it.
that was. They didn't have like you could go to a Glassdoor or something and find out what everybody's
Yeah.
title is and how much you paid.
Yeah.
Like that was not a thing. So
Yeah. No LinkedIn quite yet.
No.
Yeah.
None of that.
No.
So
I remember being in high school and the Vic Firth website and watching that 2001 Blue Devils. You had a couple of clips, and I don't know, hours just over and over and over and over and over. And I thought it was just the most amazing thing. Now it's really common for the students today. They watch, Blue Coats 87 times a day, whatever,
Yeah.
this, watch all the drum corps. But that was like pretty rare.
Yeah.
And then I would watch, and then they would be in Dallas, and then I would go, like, oh yeah, I saw that part. That was such a cool experience
Yeah,
to learn
now-
start learning things.
Now it's like they'll watch a Blue Coats or Cadets lot that happened 2 hours ago.
yeah.
Fully edited in 4K.
And I was about to say they gripe if it's not 4K.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's not stereo, great audio, they go like, God, would you film this on your Nokia?
Yeah.
Like, dude, man, back in the day.
Right.
I'll keep away from the back in the day stories, but
Sure.
it was literally, like that man, seeing drum corps in the way I saw drum corps and like knowing, and part of my background of growing up in rural West Texas in San Angelo, even though I had a great instructor and, and a friend group and everything, it was like I didn't have access to watching anything. Dallas
Right.
show was it.
Yeah.
That was the one and only show I ever went to. Great drummers playing, never saw them. Great,
Right.
Never saw Lee Howard Stevens until I went to the first PAS that I had to drive to, wherever it was, Dallas, I think.
Nice.
So part of my psyche has always been, I'm going to bring this to people who don't have access.
Yeah.
A great use
love
for
that.
the internet.
Yeah.
A great use for the internet. Yeah.
Yes, the internet is used for many things these days. As we were scrolling through TikTok last night, and we
Yeah.
were like, "What has?" The
It wasn't
world
as much of a
come
dumpster
to?
fire back then as it is now.
Yeah.
Not quite. It was. I don't think it took long though for the internet to become a dumpster fire in some corners, for sure. But
That's true.
Well, thank you both for sharing your backgrounds, and it's just super interesting to hear how both of you guys kind of started as percussionists, and it led you to these really unique and cool jobs. So can you talk a little bit more about what you're doing now? Brian, you're the artist relations manager. And
Yeah,
so what
so-
does that look like? I just want to preface this by apologizing for the many, many times that I've texted you.
Oh,
and said,
no.
hey, can we get this? Hey, can we
No,
get
no,
this?
that's
Hey,
part
can we get
of the
this? 'Cause
gig.
You are amazing at that. That is.
Thank you.
You do that
That's-
really well.
That's part of it. So, all right. So what I'm going to do now is put a pause so I can do this. Okay, here we go. Ready? And I'm going to answer your question.
Nice.
So my role is really unique in that I'm trying to, again, like this could go on for hours.
Sure.
So Zildjian, and make sure I get the date right. Zildjian acquired Vic, is it 2010-ish?
Sure.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But they were operating independently for years after that. Even when Zildjian bought Vic, they were still operating independently for years.
Yeah.
In 2016 is when the beginning of the real merging of processes and teams and all that started. So the late, great Al Moffat, who had been, I forget his title, but it was basically artist relations for the marching world for Zildjian forever. He passed away in 2016, and he irreplaceable, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, now technically Al was always part-time. He was part-time for Zildjian the whole time. He was never a full-time employee. He was a part-time guy. So it was like, okay, well, he passed away. So we need somebody to do his role. However, we're one company now. And then the stuff on the Vic side with marching started to get shuffled responsibilities. Some people were absorbing some Zildjian stuff. So there became an opportunity like, well, we need someone now on the Vic side. So they took, and my own opinion on the math was Al's job was a 2/3 full-time, 2/3 job.
Sure.
And the Vic marching was 2/3.
Yeah.
So they tried to shove that and make it one.
To one, nice.
Which it isn't.
There's some overflow there.
But they tried. And so they said, we'll make one position.
But they
and
didn't pay him 4/3.
Yeah. 4/3.
Paid him 2/3.
Yeah. Right?
Smart math there.
Hey, I got an idea.
Company math.
Company math. For
Company
it.
math. So, they were like, we'll create a position and call it marching manager. So the job was basically, my title has changed since then, but basically it was someone to be an artist relations person just for marching to cover both brands.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, at least my understanding, it was the first position and the whole company that was, I guess, developed to cover both brands.
Yeah.
Since then, there have been other positions created, and there's been lots of people who have been merged into other, brought on other brands and other. But this was like, we're gonna hire a position called marching manager. We've never had it before. All they do is marching. So that's when they sent the email out to the Vic Firth education team.
Yeah.
It was, we're hiring for a marching manager.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got the job. So it's a unique role that it kind of. Versions of it existed before, but not in this way to cover both brands.
Right.
So that was December of 2016 is when I started.
And you applied whilst teaching at Mechanicsburg, or you exited that role at that point? Or?
The part that I had left out, which is not uninteresting, but it's not music related, was that unlike you guys, I was not a full-time school teacher.
Right.
I was the drumline guy.
Yeah.
So I was like teaching a couple drum lines, writing this, that. My full-time job was I was an assistant director of admissions at a college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I wore a tie and I tucked in my shirt, the whole thing.
No tie today for the podcast?
Not since then. Very sophisticated. So I was doing. It was a great job. I loved that job, and I was doing that for. That was my full-time job. I was working at admissions at a college in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow. See, I did not know that.
Yeah. So a lot of those, and again, this could be a whole nother podcast. So the skill set involved with admissions and talking to families about this and that are absolutely transferable to what I'm doing now.
For sure.
Which I think was a big part of why I seemed fit. For this job. So, anyways, So I still taught Mechanicsburg for a year and a half when I got this job.
Oh, nice.
Which was physically painful to do all of that. It was I had an amazing staff, and we had developed a whole. You know how that goes. You have many years. You've kind of built your culture, and you have your team, and it's all dialed in, and so it kind of made it work. But it was. I'm also married with a lot of kids.
Yes,
so that's,
we'll get to that a lot. We'll talk about that. But that's awesome. And so
I think he's Mormon.
Yeah. And so along with your job, I mean. I have to ask, do you feel like Santa Claus sometimes? Because you just get to bring all the gifts. That's great.
I guess that depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Right? No, I don't feel like Santa. I actually, most of the time, because, you guys want to do, excuse me, you guys want to do a lot of things for your students, but you have like parameters you need to operate under.
Yeah.
We're the same.
Yeah.
We want to do this and that and everything. I want to be able to give everybody everything they want.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, we're only able to support in certain ways.
Yeah.
If a lot of people are buying our stuff.
Right.
So if people aren't buying the stuff, then we can't afford to like
just give stuff
do
away.
things.
Yeah.
Right.
Fly here.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the money from stick and mallet sales allow us to invest into coming to things and filming groups and promoting artists, promoting ensembles, which in turn promote the brand, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of times it feels like, you know, oh, Brian, you've done so much, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I'm like a facilitator.
Right.
You know, like none of this can happen if it wasn't for the kids and the staff and Mark Wessels.
Yeah.
You know, like all the people at Vic over the years. Like none of it. The factory. I'm not making any of these things.
Right.
I don't make a stick
Brian,
at all.
we need you to come in today and
Rewrap some
whittle
mallets.
down this.
And I mean, even now, it's like I guess you could say I have a tiny little voice in the product development, but it's mostly just people saying, what do you think? Like, you think this is a good idea? And I mean, do they even care? Maybe they care. I don't know. But I mean, I'm not making the stuff, you know, it's like, it's up to the factory and it's up to the team up there is amazing. And I mean, they're the ones doing it. They've been doing it forever. Yeah. And all the people that Vic met along the way to figure out how to keep sticks straight. I mean, that sounds weird to us. We're talking about the internet. But there was a time where it's like, I don't know if these sticks will even stay straight. Like, I don't know, it's wood.
Yeah.
And then Vic and his team, they figured out a way to do it. And then it's like, but man, these sticks are totally unmatched. Vic was the guy to figure out, him and his team, how to match it. I had nothing to do with any of that.
Right.
So like Boston Crusaders yesterday was telling me like, you got Brian, unbelievable job. Every pair of stick you have sent has been amazing. You're the man. And I'm like,
you're not in the office.
Welcome.
Well,
like,
thank you. Tell them I need a raise.
And it feels great, but I really do. I work really hard on perspective on that and just trying to take it easy because I have, again, this could be a whole other podcast.
Yes.
I have a lot of friends in the business who, during the pandemic, you know, they either lost their jobs or they got furloughed and they went to something else and something this. And what it did to them personally, you could really see that they were maybe, I mean, I don't want to jump to conclusions, and I definitely won't share names, but maybe they were subconsciously taking some ownership and credit for many of the things they were being given praise for.
Yeah.
And so when they now didn't have an opportunity to deliver these wonderful things, the praise was not coming.
Yeah.
And it affected them.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that was a big thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I better be careful because it's like,
from that.
I mean, there's a lot about, and I'll also say there's a lot about what I do that elevates Vic and Zildjian, and it helps and it's wonderful and they need me.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's not, in no way, shape, or form. It's not me, you know. It's it's all everyone else that's doing the thing. So, yeah.
Well, we're certainly thankful for the work you put in because we know it's a full-time, more than a full-time job to
4/3
to 4/3 as we talked about.
As we talked about.
Yeah. Yep. So, well, thanks, Brian, for sharing. You know, what you're currently doing. Mark, will you kind of talk about what does your role look like these days at Vic Firth?
Well, first, I got to push back on Brian saying that he's, like I'm just a facilitator.
Yeah.
What it goes into facilitating, like the mini groups who call you on Saturday morning and go like, "Hey, Brian, we're out of sticks." Like what?
I consciously left that part out, so I'm glad you mentioned it. Actually.
No, but like just what it takes in the organization of okay, we do have back orders on this Marima mallet. Okay, let's facilitate as soon as those get made. I get the first 20 pair, so because I got to fulfill my commitments to these guys, and like he always has the educator at the top of his mind of the guys in the trenches, so he's like wrestling mallets out of the hands of sales guys going like, "We need those," and Brian's going, "These guys are on tour,"
Yeah, that's hard.
So he does that. His blood pressure is already going up. I can see his, like.
Well, now we're kind of past the point of no return. It's July 23rd, so now it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah. And he always has this point where he's going like, it's good. And then marching band starts up and colleges start calling him going like, "Where's my stuff?"
Yeah.
And then WGI. And it's just like
never ends. Never
Not
ends.
to mention mentioned concert percussion and drum set, which he is also.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that, but my role's expanded to orchestral and all educators. Yeah, it's expanded quite a bit. So
that's incredible. Yeah, because I knew you for sure you were over the marching. I thought you were over maybe some of the drum set stuff at some point.
I mean, I guess if I know he's answering a question right now, but I mean,
we do a lot of diversions on this
after
podcast.
The pandemic. Gosh, I'm like simplifying this beyond belief, but it's like the whole team got sort of redefined. Team meaning artist relations. Well, the whole company, but really specifically our department, artist relations, everyone got redefined because we lost some people, and so now I'm an artist relations. That's when my title changed to artist relations manager. So there's 3 artist relations managers.
Gotcha.
2 are drum set, and I'm everything else.
Yeah.
Wow.
And education. I mean, like if you're a drum set educator, not a performer,
Right.
Yeah.
you go to Brian.
So I basically deal with all educators.
Yeah.
And then marching artists and orchestral artists. And, marching and orchestral people more or less kind of live in the educator world anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's all one big happy family. But the roster size expanded significantly when I took over that part of it.
Do you know exactly what the roster is? I mean, can
No,
you give
I
us
probably don't want to know.
Yeah.
I mean, the education team alone has a few thousand people on it.
Yeah, that list is pretty expansive.
But then you think about like the PDT people and orchestral artists, and it's a lot.
Wow.
Yep.
So, Mr. Wessels, you've praised Mr. Stockard here.
Man,
Is it even possible to define what you do these
well,
days?
actually, it is now. Back in the old days of director of internet activities.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like it evolved, and like the one thing that people have to know is you just have to be okay with evolution.
Yeah.
There is no dream job. It's a dream that you keep moving and you keep adapting, and that's what makes life so interesting. Very early on, we had a marketing team of people who designed print ads. Like that was marketing back in the day. It's like, okay, we got the back cover of Modern Drummer, we got the front cover
Steve
of
Weiss
inside cover
catalog
of PAS, and like all of that stuff was handled by somebody else. And then early on, it was like, hey, like people are really digging this in the lot thing. In 2000, I had a kid come up and he goes, "How long you been doing this?" And I went, "Probably before you were born." Like, when were you born? He goes, 2000. I went, that's when I started filming in the lot when nobody was out there. But anyway, I started thinking, well, we should do drum set. Wouldn't it be cool to have cameras on guys on stage, or teach lessons? And so my role just rapidly evolved into what is now really considered digital marketing. I never had a product perspective, and a lot of that comes from the fact that Vic Firth are the sticks, and like you don't see brands on sticks when people are playing. You just know that they're playing with Vic.
Right.
So it went from going to concerts and before the days of GoPros, getting one camera on a drum set, and GoPro came out, and it's like, oh man, we could put 2 GoPros on a kit, and then we could do multicam, and then I could get, back in the day, it was whatever sound was coming out of the little recorder you had at the drum set, and then pretty soon it was like, what'd be great is if we got the board mix, and you learn all about how to juggle band, contracts and all that stuff. Anyway, and then pretty soon we're putting on our own productions. We started with when Joe Testa came on, and Joe Testa is our boss came on from Yamaha. He had done the Yamaha Groove Night, and he was, we were like, oh man, this would be great. Let's get a bunch of drummers at center staging and film them playing solos and tracks. So much better than just a festival or something like that. And then that evolved into, hey, it'd be great is if we have this event called VF Jams, let's get Sput Seawright and basically Snarky Puppy to come in and have a tune, and then have different drummers play with the band. And then that evolved into Zildjian Live and Zildjian Underground. And so that was my job. It was just kind of like, like, and it was driving the corporate world crazy, because it was very difficult to put in a org chart in a box.
Yeah.
You know, because social media, that was me. I was in charge of that. You know, all of anything that was on the internet. You know, like all of the performance videos. Early on with Soul Percussion, you know, filming them. Early on with Yale Percussion Group, you know, all the stuff. And I am kind of that all, you know, everything in percussion fascinates me. You know, so there's nothing you could pick up a juice harp and start playing it. If you're really good at it, I'm going like, I got to film that. I got to bring that to the world because nobody has ever seen. You know, so. You know, that's what my job was just to be fascinated and go like, I need that.
Someone asked me one time what it is you had done for so long, and I said, well, basically, anytime you see Vic Firth other than in a store, it was Mark.
Yeah.
So like anything, video, you know, even magazine stuff. Like even though maybe you weren't like dealing with the print ads, chances are the picture you took.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, you know, so it evolved, and eventually after the acquisition, we were still a Vic Firth team, and they had a Zildjian marketing team, and then eventually, you know, first they merged the AR department, which I was not in. I was in marketing. You know, my role was in marketing, and then they merged the marketing department, so I was still in marketing up until like right before the pandemic. I was the digital marketing director of both companies.
Right.
So, you know, and, you know, in the way the philosophy of the guys who run the company try to do this correctly, the marketing philosophy was more like, okay, traditional marketing.
Yeah.
You know, like we need pictures of sticks on, you know, sidewalks or you know, like we need beautiful photography and beautiful, you know, like these cinematography, you know, like I never was that guy. I was just the guy throwing cameras up and you know, like so we used to have like 3 videos a day come out of all kinds of stuff and you know, like no, we need to like get it down to 1 a week that's just beautifully shot. And then I was like, I'm out, you know, like this is not my role. So so right now I am the director of education. Which he's kind of the director of education. I mean, like he's the AR education.
Sure.
I'm the resource content director. Or, you know, I live on an island, so any content that's education, it's just me to produce. So
very cool.
Long-winded story of.
We'll probably get to some of the other things about some of the. I got some stuff I want to ask about just the resources that you know we want to make sure people are aware of. But that'll kind of when we talk about that, I'm sure we'll come back to some of a lot of things that you helped create. I mean, the Percussion 101 stuff with David Skidmore. I mean, all the you know the quizzes and all of that stuff that's on the website. You know, you had a huge role / you were the one doing it. I mean,
it's going like help.
It was like that was you. I mean, so and
I didn't know of anybody. Well, we. You know, like it is not all me. And, you know, like the biggest thing about this is that when you are really close to a lot of artists, you know, like artists, especially at the top end, they have this energy and they have this, you know, like passion. They want to bring things, you know, like we were having breakfast yesterday with a guy who is hopefully coming on to our team, who is just so incredibly passionate about education and wanting to do this and wanting to do that. And my job is, you know, basically facilitate and, you know, let's figure out a way that's going to be the most effective. So John Wooten, you know, like actually the Rudiment thing was mine and I got John, but David Skidmore was a student of mine at Plano Shepton High School, and you know, like, hey, I got this idea of doing this Percussion 101. Will you do it? You know, and so you know, like a lot of that stuff comes out of artist passion. You know, Groove Essentials with Tommy Igo, and I mean, like
the Stanton Moore stuff.
Yeah.
It's super cool. And we'll talk a little bit. I'll give you guys a chance to kind of talk a little bit more about all those things in a little bit later, because I want people to know that they exist. I mean, percussionists and non-percussionists. Yeah, I think it's super important. So kind of, you know, we've talked about your background. We've talked about what you're currently doing. Let's talk about Zildjian 400. You know, and the legacy and the legacy of Vic Firth. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are your thoughts? Like, what what do you think about when you go to work every day and you just work for these, like, I mean, am I correct in saying that Zildjian is literally the oldest company that's still operational in the United States? Isn't that
oldest family-owned business?
Family-owned
I think
business.
that's what it's called. Oldest family business in the U.S.
That's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
the weight that is on your all shoulders to uphold that legacy. Can you just talk about, you know, how do you feel about that?
I mean, for me, it's and I think all of us actually are in the same boat where, you know, you have to get yourself mentally prepared when you pursue a profession that is also very personal.
Yeah.
Because that means the ups and downs. The ups are better than everyone else's ups, but the downs really suck.
Yeah.
Because it's personal.
Yeah.
So when your kids don't perform well, or someone's sad, or they quit,
Yeah.
you take it personal, whether you'd like to admit it or not. It hurts, you know.
Yeah.
So like, I think for me, Zildjian and Vic Firth, both were a huge part of my life when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, and again, like, you know, we keep talking about Mark, but this is what happens when you've been there for so long. You have a big impact. So, like, the stuff that Mark brought to Vic Firth, like, for example, in 01, when the lot was up, on the, you know, there was like going to a show and seeing a drum line in the lot is a huge part of the experience, and it has a massive impact on just the rest of your whole life, that emotional feeling you get being able to sit there and watch an amazing drumline. And VicFirth.com was providing that. I could never go watch. I grew up in California. I could never go watch the Cadets.
Yeah.
You know, I could never go see the Cavaliers because they didn't come to California. But now I can because of Vic. So while marketing-wise that makes sense, and it makes me want to buy Vic Firth now because I'm on the website more.
Yeah.
But it's more like Vic Firth gets it.
Yeah.
Like, these guys, they understand me.
Yeah.
That creates this bond emotionally. And that's existed long before I even thought of I would ever work for the company.
Right.
So now that I work for the company, you take it personal every single day. So the stuff we feel good about, I feel amazing. And the stuff that we get frustrated with, we get pissed.
Yeah.
Like, we want it to be better. We want this to be, you know, and it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the reasons the companies are so successful is that people are so passionate.
Yeah.
So anyways, like, with it being 400 years and with Vic, you know, for me, it's like I have a responsibility to serve this thing bigger than me.
Yeah.
Because of what it gave to me all growing up. It's still giving to me, and it's helped define me. It's provided so much value and just fulfillment in my life. And now I've been given this opportunity to not only give back to the company that I felt like just gave so much to me, but do my best to, I keep saying facilitate. That's what I should change the job title. Artist Relations Facilitator. To facilitate that being given to everyone else, like you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you guys feel like at some point, I hope, I'm putting you on the spot here, you're being filmed. I hope the idea is like, okay, product-wise, Zildjian and Vic is giving you guys what you need to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, your relationship with the company via me and Mark, you feel like these guys get it. Like, they're really supportive, and that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is the Vic Firth, the company's 60th anniversary.
Wow.
And it's Zildjian's 400th.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just a reminder of, wow, like, this legacy is going on, and this is, you know, going to be here for hundreds of more years.
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about like the impact and like responsibility for the brand 400. You should ask the Zildjian family members how they feel about that.
Yeah.
Because I know Katie was telling me I don't even understand like how my family has owned this company for 400 years, and I'm supposed to keep this going. Like, it's a lot of pressure on them too. But
For sure.
again, it's personal.
Right.
And they love it.
That's personal. I think that's the cool thing about it. It's just, you know, I was thinking bigger, just music in general, how it's going to endure. Has endured since the beginning and will endure forever. And these companies being such a major part of how that's evolved and how that's continuing to affect students like every day.
Like what we're watching kids in the lot, and they're watching Cadets or Boston, and I remember watching that. I remember the first time I was in the lot, like really seeing a high level line, and it was Blue Devils playing Diddy, and I was just sitting there like my face getting completely melted. And you know, watching these drum lines, I maybe I'm being dramatic, but I really feel like these guys have what they need to play this in part because of the work I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's dramatic, I know.
No.
But I really take it personal. I'm just like, these guys need these freaking sticks.
Yeah.
And if they're not good sticks, like they can't have the impact on themselves personally, on the art form, and then on all the kids watching.
Right.
Wow.
Like, and the factory, you know, they're the ones doing the magic, actually making the sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, once they make them, they sit on the shelf. So
Right.
they got to get to where they need to go. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I think everyone at the company really, it's a personal journey for everybody.
That's such a cool perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like in my perspective, you know, we see brands like Yamaha or Vic or Zildjian or, you know, like many of the iconic brands, and we think of them as a, I don't know, almost like a non-touchable entity. You know,
Yeah.
the what, and I had that opinion of Vic before, you know, he brought me up there for that very first presentation. You know, like I flew in, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go see Vic Firth, the huge conglomeration of, you know, whatever. I got in a cab, we drove, and then they pulled into this crappy little, you know, like shopping center thing that had a little logo on it that said Vic Firth, and I was like, I think I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting like like a, you know,
Right.
huge place with a big showroom, you know, whatever. And it's just like, I walked up the stairs, you know, and I had to go like, where's Vic Firth? And the guy went, yeah, it's there. Around the bathroom, it's over there, you know, like, and literally it was, I walked in a room and there was, you know, 8 people in the office, like 8 people.
Wow.
And Vic had an office, and Rick Drum, the president, had an office, and Neil Larrabee had an office, and everybody else was kind of in these cubicles around a conference center, tiny, smaller than this room, you know, literally. And it was just the realization that happened over a little bit of time. First, it was just like, I'm working for Vic Firth. Not
Yeah.
only the man, you know, the company, but the man himself.
Yeah.
And it was like the realization that it's really the people. It's the people in Vic Firth that made Vic Firth.
Yeah.
And not only Vic himself. I mean, Vic was, I could go on with Vic stories forever. But the one thing that he was like constantly, his I don't know, overarching philosophy is that he was dissatisfied with everything.
Yeah.
You know, like he was dissatisfied with how he played timpani. He was dissatisfied with the mallets that he was playing with. He was dissatisfied with how he was educating at you know, Boston Conservatory or New England Conservatory. He was, you know, like, so everything that he did was, how can we make that better? How can we make that better? And that was like every conversation you had with Vic was, okay, that's great. How can we make it better?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, without Neil Larrabee and without, you know, Vic and the people who were there constantly just with this drive, it would not be Vic Firth.
Yeah.
You know, it was Vic Firth before I got there. It'll be Vic Firth after I'm gone. But if that sense of it just needs to get better prevails, then you will always have these iconic brands. And that's the thing about Zildjian. If you go back into the history and the story of Zildjian, you know, there's a lot of stuff like, you know, the fact that the guy was making cymbals for the Sultan and his son, you know, they were into metallurgy and they were just trying to find gold, a way of making gold.
Yeah.
And they came upon this recipe and he dropped it on the ground and it was like this amazing sound. And they went like, whoa,
Yeah.
we could make cymbals out of that, you know, like, and started making cymbals for the Sultan 400 years ago. And then, you know, like it became such a huge deal that the Sultan said, okay, I'm going to allow you to start your own company. You know,
Yeah.
like you think about,
Wow.
I mean, you know, like if that happened today, like that recipe that guy in, you know, a hut in, you know, wherever the hell, Constantinople,
yeah.
did is the same recipe. It hasn't changed.
Wow.
That
Wow.
one, you know, it's a secret recipe, but you know, like that, those were the symbols that they took to the World's Fair in 18 whatever from Turkey, and Beethoven and Brahms started hearing cymbals. Beethoven composed his Turkish marches and asked for Zildjian cymbals to be played because they sounded so much better than so the history, and you can kind of gloss over like how important all of that was to like the iconic drummers of Gene Krupa, and like you go through all of that stuff, and it's like the Zildjian family, same as Vic, has always had that passion of, I just need it to get better. The products need to get better. What are we not offering? What are we not bringing? And what are we not doing in marketing? How can we do that better?
Yeah.
What are we doing in education? How can we do that better? So that to me encapsulates the brands, not so much this sticker on a wall or a logo. It has nothing to do with that. It's the people. It's the people in the office doing the job every day that make that company.
That was really cool to hear you say all that, because I was sorry. That was really cool to hear you say all that, because I was thinking of names.
Yep.
And I'm thinking of like Kyle Thomas, our Vic Firth brand manager, Tim Seppi, in charge of research development for Mallets, Guy Licata, all these people. I'm like, they all fit that exact same mold.
Yeah.
People that at Zildjian and Vic who are, they're responsible for trying to carry this on. I'm like, they're the ones.
Yeah.
People and passion.
Yeah.
It's like education.
We're about to do the same. Yeah, we'll tie it into what we're talking about
is like people with a passion create memories and create products and create experiences for other people that are invaluable as they go forward in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a coincidence. It's not coincidental that the two companies that we're talking. You guys. I mean, I want to say that you guys are giants in the industry. We have you on the podcast because we have a high level of respect for both of you and what you do. And we want people to hear your perspective. But like the next level of that is you represent like what you just explained about the history of Zildjian. Like you guys are awesome, but you represent these companies that just have impacted what we do on a level that no one can measure, and I just think that's so cool. And like you're kind of describing some of your passion for it. I'm like tearing up over here to like really like it's settling with me like how impactful these two companies have been on my own education.
Yeah,
and
like, likewise.
Like what you said about like, oh, this company gets me. It's like that. I think that epitomizes what has taken Vic Firth in the world of the internet and influence and kids watching. There's probably hundreds or thousands of kids right now on Sunday morning on YouTube watching the material that you guys put on there. Mm-hmm. And so it's just so cool to just kind of sit here and just talk about that and recognize that. It's awesome.
Like the other thing I want to come back to is that Vic, the man, the value that he had in educators, he was always going, these are the guys that are producing the next generation. Like it's your passion to sit in a La Quinta, ballroom on Sunday morning and do this podcast. I mean, like I'm guessing that you're not getting rich by doing this. Like,
not yet.
But he was the same way, and and I don't put myself in my position above anybody. I joke about like, hey, maybe tomorrow I'll be sweeping the floors. But, everybody plays a part in this.
Yeah.
The guy who's your snare tech, or the guy who's writing the show, or the guy who's facilitating the rehearsal or whatever. Every single piece of that is what makes the whole.
Yeah.
And that's what the Zildjian Vic Firth is. I mean, like when I think about walking through the office and every single person, you don't really survive in our environment very long unless you're passionate.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same in, marching percussion. If you look at the top groups, or even if you look, like the bulk of how many great groups and how many great kids. Like I was out at Forney, like you guys were preparing to go to PAS, and it's like the passion that you guys and the kids were like all about performing and learning the pieces, and so it just it's a big snowball.
Yeah,
it's very cyclical,
Yeah.
We feed off of each other's passion.
Yeah, you were saying that it's all passion and it's all genuine. Like when you guys were rehearsing that, You know how many groups Lalo has stood in front of and clapped his hands and danced, and he meant every single one of those claps.
Yep.
We walked in, I see Lalo up there. I'm like, God, that guy's so great. Look at him go. And he means all of it up there. He just means it. It's great.
He's awesome.
Yep.
Well, man, I really am like tearing up, and I'm just super excited to talk about this. But there's a lot of other stuff we want to cover, so let's try to move on to the next thing. And I'll pause this real quick, and we'll hit a new project. Well, that's just amazing to hear. You know, not only the incredible stories of Zildjian and Vic Firth, but just how passionate you guys are and upholding those legacies. And we share that passion. And, you know, it's just so cool to be even small, like in the small way affiliated with, you know, two legendary companies. So I want to make sure we take time for you guys to kind of talk about some of the resources that are available through your websites, because that's something that, you know, Vic Firth, especially on that side of things, is kind of known for, is not just being a stick 'em out company, but really, you know, connecting with educators and giving them resources. So Mark, maybe you can kind of just give us a rundown of some of the things that people might not know about that they have access to.
Yeah, right now nothing, because the marketing team decided to change website platforms, and then they didn't tell me until they launched it that all of the education stuff is not up. So, you know, like we need to, it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, they were like, well, we didn't have any, you know, these guys are not drummers who are in the, or whatever. I won't go off on it, but now I'm recreating all of everything that we have. So,
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if you want to cut all of that out, but so right now, if somebody's going to go to vicfirth.com, they're going to see like 3 things and like,
What are you
what's
talking
this?
about?
You know, like,
Yeah.
But I mean, like 20 years of, or 20, what are we, 23 years of me creating stuff. So right at the very beginning, it was like, as a band director, I remember that all of these companies would send out posters, but not posters, but calendars. You know, like you'd get like a Brooke Mays calendar and a Yamaha calendar and a this calendar. And Vic used to have a calendar, and it was like, you know, so the first thing I did when I went in, I went, this is useless. You know, like I get 10 calendars. Why do I need another calendar?
Yeah.
I said, why don't we do something that's educational, and then have resources on the internet, you know, this new thing.
Yeah.
And you know, let's print the rudiments. And you know, like way back in 2000, there was kind of fear that kids were not being taught the rudiments anymore. You know, it was one of those like, kids don't know how to drum anymore. You know, some of the old guys just talking about like, man, you know, like they're playing buzz rolls and they're in the back of the band and nobody ever plays rudiments anymore. You know, so that was one of my big things. Like, I really need to bring the rudiments back. Yeah. And one of my really good friends, you know, forever was John Wooten. And Wooten, you know, like with Marty Hurley, Skywriters toured with, man, this is a long conversation about this. Skywriters toured with Phantom Regiment, and I got to be really good friends with John and Marty Hurley and, you know, all of this stuff. And, you know, like, and I learned so much about the East Coast style of rudimental drumming and everything because I was just from San Angelo. What do we know? You know, anyway, so I had all of these training things, and I went, I'm going to call up John and see if he can come over my house, and we're going to film him playing all the rudiments, because he was the breakdown master. You know, like, I tried to get Jeff Queen to do it, and he had never broken down a rudiment in his life, even though he had these amazing hands. You know,
he
like
could play all of them.
You know, I went, okay, let's do the single stroke roll, and he started breaking it down, and it was like, I hit the stop button, and it was like, Jeff, I'm going to do you a favor by not publishing this. He's like, what do you mean, man? I went, dude, have you ever broken down a rudiment, like slow to fast, slow? He's like, no. He's like, okay, I can tell. You know, I mean, he could play everything. Yeah. If Jeff, you're listening to this, apologize, but you remember that. Anyway, so that was the very first big resource that we have, and most people, it's still the #1 page on the Vic Firth website is. You know, single stroke roll and the 40 rudiments. And then from there we kept going. You know, like I had this idea of like, what are the rudiments for drum set? Well, it's grooves. And so, you know, created the Encyclopedia Grooves. And I stole the idea from an old pamphlet that somebody had put out, you know, 50 grooves every drummer should know kind of thing. And I went, we should put that on a poster. And then that evolved into, like, who do we get to this? My original idea was to get all the funk drummers to record the funk grooves, the jazz guys to do the jazz grooves, the world, you know, like, it it was a facilitation nightmare. And then Rick Drum said, I know a guy who can play all of it. It's like, because he took lessons from Tommy Igoe's dad, and he goes, Tommy was pretty young, playing, I mean, amazing drummer, March the Bridgeman, so he had all of that stuff. So we went to Tommy and said, hey, how would you like to do the Groove Essentials with us? Yeah. And then that turned into this huge thing. So that was another, big thing that originally all the Groove Essentials and then Hudson Music kind of took it over and said, hey, we need to take all that stuff down. But yeah, I mean, like one thing after another, like we have, I did a 2 Mallet Fundamentals poster that is the no excuses for learning your major scales. You can put it up on your wall, and practice your scales and 4 mallet stuff. I mean, it's just once we get everything back up, if you go there, it's pretty much anything that you want to learn about. Yeah. If you want to learn, the art of bot drumming from John Riley, I filmed an entire lesson series with John of 25 lessons of, which is fascinating. I mean, every one of these things are fascinating to me. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's really tough for me to go, okay, what's the thing?
Yeah, I'm trying. It's, it's funny. It's like, so what was it like teaching for 20 years? And just like, oh my God, how do you answer that question? Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's like you can have your kind of, I don't want to say standard, but if it is standard, it's because of the stuff that Vic has done. It's become a standard. Things like, the rudiments are up there, and like the rudiment test, where you get like the bronze, silver, gold, and all that. That's up there. And then things like Groove Essentials and the mallets, like you said. But then there's some real cool, detailed stuff like the John Riley stuff, and then also there's a lot of marimba etudes and
that's right. You guys do.
Why am I blanking? Brad Meyer puts stuff up every single year.
For the TMEA All-State.
Yeah, for TMEA All-State. He actually just finished another whole chunk of it. So stuff like that goes up all the time. And then once when Zildjian has always cared about education deeply.
For sure.
But they've never had Mark Wessels. Yeah. So in the last few years, he's really been able to build up a lot of the stuff on the Zildjian education side too. And he had this really cool idea. It's 100% his credit, but it was awesome. In the pandemic, you're on the Peloton. Yeah. And you have the guy on the screen like coaching you. Yeah. It's like, wouldn't that be cool to do that? Like do a workout. Yeah. With like John Mapes or like Scott Johnson so we did a bunch of those during the pandemic.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah.
So those are still available. And it's like things like that. Like we get kind of stuff that you think would be that are standard educational tools and resources, whether they're videos or lesson pages or posters or something, a lot of interactive stuff. Yeah. But then there's some really unique things like a Zildjian workout or the bebop drumming or something.
And a lot of these ideas come from, just being out in a parking lot or, like at a convention at TMEA or something like that, somebody saying, the problem that I have with my percussion methods course is that I can't cover it all in a semester. What would be cool is to have like the basics of everything, so I could just push them over there and go, hey, watch all of this. And that became Percussion 101. Yeah. And then, like, oh, man, I wish there was a standard, a bunch of low-end exercises for drumline that they could watch really good drummers play, and that became Marching Percussion 101. Yeah. And then we, like I took that to, we filmed Music City Mystique Cymbaline doing an entire like fundamentals of indoor cymbals, which is not all about playing. It's more about flipping and throwing things, It was one of those things like, hey, man, this is going on. We should just be the catalyst for people learning how to do it. Yeah. So there are other people that do it, certainly. But, like we kind of have this vehicle, and we have a channel and we have a a megaphone. Yeah. So it's utilizing, even though there are ideas that other people have, it's utilizing our megaphone. Yeah. In as an effective way as I can. Yeah.
I was just going to point out, I mean, one of the things that we use in our program since I started teaching is the Percussion 101 stuff. Yeah. And just the way that it's laid out with the explanations and the videos. And then, my students go into, I've kind of converted the quiz into our learning management system so they can actually go online, take the quiz through we use Canvas not using it anymore. But it's just a great way for them to, and they have the review. They have to go fill out the review and watch the videos and all. And we do most of it in class, but that's been a really great resource for us. And again, we don't get to it all. I mean, we do the timpani pretty heavy. We do concert bass drum and suspended cymbals and crash cymbals. But it's great for them to hear, someone other than me every once in a while. Yeah. Hey, here's how you do this. And then there's all these other worksheets that go with that.
Yeah. So. I mean, like the catalyst for that was me being a band director.
Right.
Like my percussion instructor that I employed was like Rick Rodriguez and Jeff Queen and Robert Anderson. They were my guys that would come into my band hall.
Yeah.
And as a band director, I don't give a shit. Percussionist, you guys go, know. But they would come back in the band hall when my guys weren't teaching, and like they'd have a gong part, and I go on, what are you doing? It's like, you're playing the gong. It's like, that's not how you play a gong. Yeah. And then realizing this guy's an 8th grader and he still doesn't know how to play a gong. Like, okay, I've never covered that.
Right. Right.
So it was one of those kind of like, there should be a place that people learn how to do things that are, like it seems no brainer to us.
Yeah.
But kids are figuring it out by going, I just don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Yeah. and for our listeners, that place is vicfirth.com, education.vicfirth.com, right? I mean, they can just go to the Vic Firth website and get there pretty easily.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The menu has
it's up at the top.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we were kind of blank is because, like you said, they changed platforms. So,
Right.
like, some of the URLs changed, but vicfirth.com/education will get you there.
Yeah, we'll get
but
you
when
there.
you go to either Zildjian or Vic Firth, there's like 3 banners at the top.
Yeah.
Artist, education, products.
Okay.
Education.
And then YouTube, I would say, is probably your other biggest.
Yeah.
YouTube and the website are probably the.
Yeah, pretty much if you want to type in, like these, we've been so dominant that if you type in snare drum rudiments, you're going to get our playlist of John Wooden.
Yeah.
If you type in percussion 101, you're going to get our playlist of all the percussion 101, march percussion 101, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's super important that people know that that's out there because, again, I think most people listening to this podcast, percussion educators probably know that it's out there, but, they need to be telling their band director friends, hey, I can't come to this middle school class. And one thing we talk about a lot is trying to cover everything. A lot of people in Texas especially have 2 or 3 middle school feeders. It's just such a great resource for those band directors to try to help educate, the whole percussionist as much as possible.
Right.
So let's move into another great resource that you're responsible for, which is your Fresh Approach series. Iconic beginner book. This is what I used when I was in 6th grade. I remember being in my living room and Mark Wessels is on the TV doing the DVD lessons, and I'm learning how to do double strokes. And I think I share that experience with thousands of percussionists all over the world. So talk a little bit about your book. And the kind of how it started, how it grew, and I know there's more than just the snare drum book, obviously, and then the impact that it's had, and then what are your plans for the future? I know you just came out with a book, so we'll talk about that as well. Sorry, that's a lot. That's a big preface, but
we got another hour. Well, I mean, like I'll go down to the basics, and it's just like you talk to John Bingaman, you talk to Ken and Wiley, everybody has a way of teaching that they want to teach.
Yeah.
And when I first was teaching in college, it was like I had the Will Coxon and the Haskell Hart book, and then a couple of other kind of books. So every kid that would walk into my studio would get like, okay, here's the 6 books that you need because I need this piece out of here, this piece out of here, for the way I teach.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon it was like, man, I can't have these kids buying this, So I would take pieces of all these books and I kind of compiled a thing, I absolutely. Copyright laws, it was really important to me, but Kinko's,
I was going to ask if Gary Larson, like, hey, can I actually use this Far Side guy on the cover here? Actually, I love the Far Side comics,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It
was just tailoring what I was doing, and in between this and this. God, man, this jumps at light speed to this. Let me just write a couple of things. So I had this notebook that all of my kids had going to Kinko's, and then friends, because you're hanging with guys at PAS or whatever, and they're going like, well, let me see that. Hey, can I get a copy of that? Can I get a copy of that? And then pretty soon it became like, I don't feel good about copying, the 3-line solo from Wilcoxon or this 3-line thing from Haskell Hard.
Right.
Let me just write, the stuff. So that was the paper and pen days of writing it out, cutting it out, pasting it into a thing, typing the explanation on a typewriter, cutting that out, pasting that in a thing. So,
Wow.
like the trivia of my early snare drum book, or even the Fresh Approach now, is like, why are there never any 8-bar phrases or anything like that? It's like, because I had these rhythms that I wanted to do, and when I ran out of space at the end of the line because I was drawing it, it's like, whole note, there we go.
Double bar.
That's a 7-bar phrase.
Yeah.
I guess the kids need to learn how to play 7-bar phrases. That makes sense. Yeah, that's what he was thinking for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and then I started a mallet book in the same way.
Yeah.
I was really heavily influenced by Randy Isles' book called Peripheral Vision Primer. Which was like huge notes and like kind of nursery rhyme stuff that was, it's a little trite, for what my kids want to do. But the idea that you needed really big notes and you really needed to teach peripheral vision and kinesthetic feel as much as you needed to teach them how to read notes and rhythms and that kind of thing. So I kind of based it off of that. And, I started really early. I hadn't intended on being a publisher as much as it was. I started writing books and people started going, hey, can I get a copy of that? And I give them copies and they're like, wait a minute. I can, I was going to Kinko's and, making tens of copies, which, almost anybody you talk to who writes a book or whatever, that's what they do. They go to Kinko's, they pay $15 for one copy, and then, and it turns into, 100 copies and 200 copies. And then I started going to state shows outside going like, hey, maybe this is something that Oklahoma or Arkansas or Florida or Ohio, and I started doing that, and then it just kind of grew and grew. Like the snare drum book, it always amazes me that I did a lot of work one time. And the snare drum book is like, man, I sell like 15,000 copies a year, and I do that in my head. I do the imagination of over the course of, now it's been almost 30 years. It's almost 500,000 copies.
Wow.
And you do that,
500,000.
you think about that level. Now, 495,000 of those kids dropped out.
All right.
But that's okay because they bought my book to begin with.
They still played the Lesson 10 duet at some point. At some point.
The finish line.
The finish line. Yeah. And then that, obviously you talked about that, went into, you created a mallet book to accompany it. And then
I did, like my heart was always in drum set. Like I played a lot of drum set, and I struggled through, the drum set stuff in college because I was never a performer. Like Kennan or Paul Rennick or, some of these guys they're freaking great educators and they're natural performers. I was kind of the guy in the, like shedding things to where I can barely get it down. But, like my thought was, what I do know that my strength is how to break something down where you can get it. So you could give me, okay, well, Brazilian drumming. You need to learn this. And the way I was learning it was by going, holy shit, how do I do this? And figuring it out.
Take the components out.
And then, but I feel like my strength is I can break that down for anybody. Because I had to do it for myself. I had to break down 4 mallets because, anyway, everything that I did. So I wrote the drum set book. And any way of writing a book takes me like 4 or 5 years. Because I sketch out all of my ideas and then I look at everything that's available. How would I learn how to play XYZ? Whether it's Brazilian drum set or just jazz independence or anything like that. Like, how does everybody else teach it? Okay, here's how I would teach it. And then I start shuffling things around. Well, I also want to teach reading, and I also want to teach technique, and I also want to teach independence. And how does that all flow together? So I wrote the drum set book, and then several years later, as I was recording the lessons for the drum set book, Stanton Moore and I are really good friends, and he was like, hey, let me see that. Man, this is really cool. And I went, hey man, I'm struggling on recording the lessons. Would you like to do? He's like, absolutely, man. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, so he didn't write the book. I wrote the book, but
Right.
he, you know, like, he changed a couple of things. He goes, man, this would be a much better, you know, songo groove than this, and that kind of thing, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the same thing, you know, I was pestering David Skidmore because he was a former student. Like, we should do a 4-mallet book, but I want to do it based off of etudes and not, you know, like the Lee Howard
Right, not as much exercises, yeah.
But I wanted to make it a little, you know, like Julie Davila's got a wonderful 4-mallet book, and Mark Ford's got a wonderful 4-mallet book. You know, I just kind of wanted it to be a little more concert, you know, like that kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know, and then really detail, like, here is the one technique that you're going to learn in this lesson.
Yeah.
And here's the quick solo that's
Yeah.
very musical that you can apply that one thing to.
Yeah.
As opposed to, okay, well, let's start. Here's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3,
Yeah.
grade 4. It was really based off of,
There's 20 techniques.
Yeah.
Now apply all of them into this one thing.
Right,
One
right.
solo.
That's hard.
Right.
you know, and I'm not saying that Mark's and Julie's book don't do that, because
Yeah.
they do. They
Yeah.
do a wonderful job at that. But it was, you know, unfortunately, when I started talking to David about doing the book, it was before they had written their books. So there was nothing really out there.
Yeah.
David took freaking forever, you know. But this was a book that I
He's
didn't
kinda
want to.
busy these days. Yeah.
I didn't want to write, you know, like I guided him. Here's what, you know, the parameters of what I want to do, and
Yeah.
then paid him, you know, like, here I'm gonna give you a, you know, an upfront, you know, to get started, because I knew he's got a family, you know, he needs money, he doesn't have just a bunch of free time. Tried
Yeah.
to get him when he had free time and nothing to do, but, you know, unfortunately, got a career and a family, and, you know, that type of thing.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we'll talk about the latest iteration of your book, but I just want to say, like, because your books utilize so many tracks and how you've implemented that element, that is why it has been so crucial to our beginner class. I mean, it's been the one that we use the most. And we talked to John and we talked to Kenan, and we do use their books in different ways throughout the year and for different purposes. And we're going to look at John's book really closely and see if there's some ways we can use some of this stuff, because we really do like a lot of what he's done with his project. But the thing I love about the Fresh Approach series the most is that I can send a kid home and they can, you know how to read and do it, but then they can play it with a track.
That's exactly
Yep.
right.
And the ability for them to do that, it's like they're playing with a band. I mean, they're getting that percussion ensemble experience
Yep.
just at home recording a video for me, but they get to play it with a cool track. And I mean, the amount of cool tracks you guys, I'm sure you had someone, did you do those, or did you have someone do those for you, or you worked with somebody?
Yeah, I had-
'Cause they're really high level. I mean,
Yeah,
they're great.
what was funny was back then, I had a guy teaching, Danny Handler, who was teaching, coming in doing private lessons. You know, he's another North Texas guy that I knew, and it's like driving down to DeSoto, and you know, I was talking about tracks, and hey, maybe I could get you to play drum set, and then we can hire Ricardo to come in and play congas, and we can hire this. And he's going like, you know, they have this new thing called loops. And I went, what? What's this thing they talk
Another
about?
new
You know,
thing that you're
and it was like,
perplexed by.
yeah, you can buy or you know, like, create a loop, and they have this new thing called Acid where you can plug in a loop, and it's, you know, and I went,
Yeah.
I
Acid,
love
the
that,
music
man.
program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Not
the music.
acid.
I was like, this is an educational podcast. We're talking about a music program.
Yeah, no, but it was that that next thing that at that time I would have loved to jump into, and
Yeah.
it was just like, I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
like, there's those parameters that you always have to set for yourself. Like, I do have this thing going on, that thing. So, you know, like, I paid him to, I want loops. And
Yeah.
I want each one of them. I want a world percussion thing. I don't want just drum set, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
I want world
A
percussion.
doombell in there.
I want as many different instruments as you can find loops for, or to create loops.
Yeah.
You know. So everything in the book, I want it just to kind of sound completely different, so they never get bored. you
Right.
know. So he did all of those things. You
That's
know.
awesome.
Yeah.
Funny, I have to interject with this. I know we're trying to wrap up
No,
a little
no,
bit, but
you're
it's
good.
really funny because I've told him this before. Like everybody, I was teaching out of Mark's book years before we ever met.
Yeah.
And Back then, I think it was only on CD at the time. Like, you didn't have any of it online.
8-track.
So I was giving lessons, you know, and I was in front of my computer with the speakers so I could play the tracks, you know.
Yeah.
And I ripped the CD from the book onto iTunes.
Yeah.
So I could just pick the lesson based off the kid and not have to find the track and use the CD. So I did that. And then I put all of everything I've ever ripped in the cloud. Right?
Yeah.
So to this day, occasionally, if I can't decide what I want to listen to in my car, I'll just hit shuffle, and next thing you know, I'll hear lesson 5. 1, 2, ready, go. Freaking Mark.
That's
Still
funny.
to this day, I have it
That's
on my
awesome.
phone in my pocket. I have the entire Fresh Approach, every track.
I think
That's
there's some
awesome.
streaming fees that I need
There
to be
should be.
Yeah,
paying.
some royalties.
I should just press play and leave it go all day.
Yeah, you get 0.001 cents every
Yeah.
time it goes on shuffle. So just kind of again, we could go on and on, but just kind of wrap up. Let's talk about real quick, like what is the beginner percussion class? You've got 2 books that has kind of combined Fresh Approach to snare drum and mallets.
Yeah, and you know, like some of it, Kenan came out with his book, and you know, he stole things from me, and you know, I stole things from him, and it's just it's not
Your old friends.
it's not a stealing thing.
Yeah.
It's
not a
I'm
stealing.
influenced by.
Yes.
You know, and one of the things that he did was he had certain lines in his book that went together, and you know, so he could have kind of a curriculum that worked together.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that is really cool. I really like that, you know, that idea. But what if I took that a step further? What if, you know, like, what if the warm-up was coordinated?
Mm-hmm.
What if every single reading line was coordinated? And, you know, I could write, because now that you have computers, you can write 8-bar phrases in the snare drum. You know, like, what if kids,
What a luxury.
Yeah. What if the kids were learning how to read, but they're learning how to read along with tunes, so they hear that tune.
Yeah.
And then also, instead of like not ever teaching a kid how to play a gong or a tambourine, what if I introduce that, you know, like, let's stop everything and do tambourine, but okay, here's the first thing, how to hold the tambourine, how to play notes.
Yeah.
And then I could say, all right, at the end of this lesson, here's a short ensemble that has snare drum, keyboard, tambourine.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm going to teach bass drum. So we're going to add that to the little ensemble. And it's like 16-bar ensemble
Right.
or whatever. And as the book progresses and as you learn more techniques, you know, thumb rolls, suspended cymbal, triangle, bass drum, timpani, you know, all of these things, then you could start packing your ensembles with more interesting things. So it's more of a musical experience for snare drummers.
Yeah.
I feel like the snare drum thing tends to be isolated in the technique and reading world.
Yeah.
And then they have to cross into music.
It's kind of a big jump to just go from, I'm playing on a pad every day, to now we're doing a percussion ensemble.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to have to force, I got to teach this kid how to play tambourine real quick. I got to teach this kid to play crash cymbals.
Yeah.
I got to teach this kid how to play bass drum. Now you're kind of like slowly getting everybody to do a little bit of that. So it's not just such a big jump from
Well,
one
and
thing to
then
another.
knowing in my time in the classroom, which granted has been 23 years ago, but knowing the excitement level that a kid who gets to play tambourine, you know, like I get to do something that none of you guys are getting to do. You know, like that motivation of going, you know, like, hey, everybody's going to work up, you know, when the caissons go rolling along, everybody's going to work up this mallet part and the snare drum part, but whoever works it up first is going to get to play bass drum and get to play, you know, like, so the motivation that you have, you know, you don't have to cycle every kid through everything, but you know, just like the flexibility you have to motivate higher performing kids and lower performing kids. You know, like as an instructor, you need those tools and that flexibility to do stuff.
Right.
And I, you know, like, it's kind of a shame that our first real ensemble experience is stop the world. We got to work on an ensemble for a solo and ensemble contest.
Right.
You know, wouldn't it be better if it was like everything's just like little chunks? Hey, we can do some fun ensembles. Let's just read, you know, like in book 2, it gets pretty hard. You know, like by the end, you're playing some pretty meaty
They're playing
stuff.
so-called laws of nature.
Steve Reich is in lesson 18. Anyway.
Phasing and
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, so there's a lot of 7th and 8th grade material in there, even if you're not using it as a method, but you're just like, hey, let's today, let's just read a bunch of ensembles, and you
Yeah.
go over here, you go over there. Now switch. Now like, and everybody's reading a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
That's just kind of fun to play.
That's super cool.
I like that it's integrated kind of step by step, interesting a little bit because that's one thing, again, going back to, percussion job is like, there's so much. Like I love in the very beginning, like parents meeting, I used to do it in the percussion room. And I used to like, hey, like your kids are going to play all of this. That's why they have to take private lessons and be involved. There's going to be extra time.
Yep.
There's a lot of things. It's not just the flute.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
You can take that one thing home every day. Dude, some days it's going to be, snare drum, and then like in 2 weeks, like, hey, you get a whole 4-mouths, and then, hey, you play this bass drum on this one thing, and they got this tambourine thing, and it can't like be bad, it has to be good. So there's all these different aspects of percussion.
That's why we're all ADD.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
Always looking at this thing.
It's like,
percussionist, sit in a chair.
Yeah,
no.
No. Yeah, can't do it.
No wonder they're goofing off in the back of the room.
Exactly.
We don't practice that.
They
We
don't
don't
practice
practice
it.
sitting down.
So I like that it's introducing this stuff, kind of throughout the year, and methodical. So at the end of the year, because one thing even for band directors is they don't, usually they're snare drum, mallets. If they get through that in the 6th grade year, that's a win.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then you're going to ask them to like play timpani and all those other things. So if they don't have a little bit of experience of that, then those are those kids in the back of the room. They have no idea. They have no clue.
Yep.
And they're just creating bad habits after that. At that point.
And then the other thing, just to mention, is that I'm working with Michael Eagle at Rhythm Monster to create the online. It's really a resource, and just realizing that guys like you or guys. Even in Texas, as good as it is, Rick Rodriguez only gets to see his beginning percussion class once a week. And then there are 4 days they've got the flute player who's the band director going like, sit down, shut up, But to give them resources to where, okay, lesson 1, hey, here's Mark Wessels teaching the book, teaching that lesson the same way I would teach a percussion class. And then, like, hey, we got a test on line number 5. Okay, well, let's do it with the accompaniment. Let's slow it down. Let's loop these 2 measures that you're having problems with. All of those things that they could do on their own, that resource, to make their practice time not only efficient but engaging. Like to me, like in my head, it's when they are not in your classroom, when they're not like I had my kids play percussion. They are only doing well when I was standing over them, but luckily I was standing over them a lot. But like, so that whole resource, and eventually this entire series will be the same way, where, hey, you can isolate the tambourine part and take the quick lesson on how to play the tambourine part. You can isolate the marimba, the snare drum, the bass drum, whatever, and get the instructional, but also, I'm filming Brady Bunch style percussion ensemble, like what's the guy, EMC, that does all of the...
Oh, Eric Carr,
So that's me, without the goofy face and the pink shirt on.
And
whatever.
Michael Eagle's excellent. He's another one that, and all the Rhythm Monster stuff is great, and the stuff, I've seen a lot of the stuff that they've done. It's
always like, okay, what's that next thing that's going to help? What's that next thing? And this is, to me, the next level thing. So,
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your success with that, and thank you for being an icon in the percussion publishing world, and the many of us who you've influenced. Just seriously, thank you for all the hard work you do. I know you love it. I know you're.
I haven't stopped yet.
Yeah.
Don't put me in the grave.
Yeah.
People are like, when are you going to retire? It's like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. 75, going to wheel me up in the parking lot.
That's all of us are like that. Al Moffat, like literally, like weeks.
Till the
He
very
was at TMEA weeks before.
Wow.
I mean, all of us are going to be like that. Retirement. What does that even mean?
Yeah. Vic was in the office.
Yeah, Vic.
Yeah.
Until he was in the hospital right after that was the last day in the office.
Wow. Yeah.
Tom Float was in the hospital, like texting Dan Wall about things that need to happen at Disney. And then listen, so like I'm still here, but like, and then unfortunately, he passed on, but he was working all the way to the end.
Yeah. Well, that might be a great little bridge to our last couple topics, which is, we are such passionate people in this job, I think more than a lot of others. And, there's a lot of career fields where people have a high level of passion for what they do. But part of what why we're doing this is to encourage people to stay in it, longer, and trying to give them tools and perspectives that are going to keep them doing, whether it's being a percussion director at the high school level or the college level, or eventually doing something really cool like what you guys get to do. Not that those other things aren't cool, but
or getting or
something cool. Random thing. Yeah. But I want to hear your perspective. What for both of you, like, what has kept you motivated? How do you kind of refill your cup? How do you come back every day and keep that passion ignited? And we can kind of tie this in with work-life balance too, because I think that's a super important thing to,
Is it though? Is it?
I can see my kids in a couple weeks. I can see my wife in a couple weeks. No, maybe tie those things together. Like, how do you continue to be passionate and motivated while also maintaining all these other family things you guys have to do outside of your jobs?
Well, I'll preface by saying I find myself struggling, and I don't want to say failing, but struggling with this all the time.
Sure.
And it's mostly just because I have like this very over the top bizarre work ethic and ambition and this and that. But in terms of the balance thing, the pandemic, like everything that happens is an opportunity to get better, like you had pointed out. And the pandemic, as awful as all of that was really terrible. It provided that perspective I kind of mentioned earlier, where I have to be really careful because this job is very meaningful and the work I do is very meaningful. It's a huge part of who I am, but like I can't let it be like all of who I am, right? The most meaningful. I can't. I have to be, and I was absolutely doing that, and I still let it trickle in every now and then.
Yeah.
But that kind of helped me realize it. So my wife and I have 4 kids. They're 13, 11, 7, and 2.
Yeah.
So we are very busy.
Yeah.
And my wife is in 11. That's a Spinal Tap reference, even older than Kinko's.
Yeah.
She's amazing, and she tells people, and I mention it, that people say, how do you do this? Your husband's, gone, and he's telling me this. And she's like, I knew who he was when I married him. So I mean, that's who he is.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, then you're in trouble. So that's a big part, a partner in your life. But one thing during the pandemic that really helped me, I think I was doing this before, but it kind of cleared up, was that I feel like what I'm doing, I need to try to do it as an act of service.
Right.
So I'm trying to serve and I'm not in it to receive. That does not mean I don't receive. And it does not mean I don't enjoy every second of receiving benefits.
Right.
And I look out for myself. Mark's been a big coach for me on that. I look out for myself, and I really try to make sure that I'm enjoying fruits of my labor. But like the general motivation is like, I got to serve. So I'm not trying to find a way for my wife to be a better wife. I'm trying to be a better husband. That's the focus.
Right.
I got to be a great father to my kids.
Yeah.
I got to try to make sure Riley and Shannon get what they need for their school.
Yeah.
I got to. So
Thank
like,
you, by the way.
So of course. And then like kind of on the micro, Mark is like, I want to do a marching percussion 101. It's like, like percussion 101, but it's just drum line, 8 on the hand, accent tap, double beat rolls, like very basic. But I want it to be with like the top marching drummers.
Yeah.
Right. And so my job was to gather them all up and get drums and get a location to film it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just like, all right, well, and I think Mark too, like, this is the thing that people need, this marching percussion 101.
Yeah.
So like we need to serve them, and we need to serve the value of what this is. So like my job on that was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, granted, of course, if I do a good job, then I look great, and people give me compliments, and they pay me money, and all that's wonderful, and I love all of that. I really do.
Yeah.
But
Especially that pay me money.
yeah. But in terms of like, the balance and motivation, I think it's like to serve. I think, it has to be centered on that.
Yeah.
And if you have that, for me, if I have that kind of outlook on all areas of my life, that's kind of like, this is a whole nother podcast, but like with my health and stuff, that's another thing that shifted during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I enjoy being healthier and all that, but it was mostly like, man, my dad was very unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so it was like, he couldn't serve his family the way he wanted to.
Yeah.
And so I was like, God, I got freaking 4 kids, man. Like, God, I
Be
can't.
running around.
Yeah, I got to serve them in a better way. So anyways, I think just centered on trying to serve, balanced with really enjoying a lot of the rewards from that service and not blowing it off like you don't deserve it.
Right.
Like, enjoying all that, I think helps create the balance, work life. Which, by the way, I do fail at that often. So this is not me. This is how everyone needs to approach their life.
Right.
That's how I think we should do it, and I need work on it. But the balance and the motivation, I think, go hand in hand.
Yeah, well, I think for your specific perspective, I think anyone who follows you on Instagram, knows that side of your life pretty well, because you're like super dad, like you're like hanging out with the kids and, hey Jack, what are you doing? And you just you love to just kind of pop a video of your kids on there, or you guys are taking a walk. And
well, they're way cooler than me.
Yeah.
I just post what I'm doing. Oh, look at Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Look at Outlook.
That's always really cool to see. So, Mark, what's your perspective on that?
Well, it's really tough because I've had this insane, and my kids would tell you, like, man, he's checked out a lot.
Yeah.
Like I'm the checked out guy because my mind runs about 100 miles an hour. The toughest thing for me is like, what do I not have time to do? Like very, very early on, I listened to some, what's this? Robbins.
I was just thinking Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
Yeah,
I listened to some things, and it was, it was all about how much can you do, and you need to have more things to do than you have time to do them. And that was kind of my guiding thing. It's like, okay, I've got this to do, I got this to do. What can I do, and what can I not? So in my head, it was always doing that. To the point where what I gave up a lot is, like normal stuff of, hey, are you watching Family Guy? Hey, do you see this episode of Seinfeld? Do you watch Yellowstone? It's like, I got no game. I don't watch sports. I watch Dallas Cowboys, but I don't watch anything else.
Yeah.
Like, I got no game when it comes to podcasts and when it comes to anything, because my mind is 100% doing this. Now, with my family, and to back up a second, I've always felt like there is no such thing as a brass ring that you're trying to catch, mm-hmm. And that's a really old reference. You'd have to look that up. But, like, there is no, like, Brian, your job is so cool. You made it. How did you do this? Like, or me or anything else. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you never know what path your life is going to take.
Yeah.
You determine that every single step, in a direction that you want to go in. Right. And I've always thought that. And, like, if you would have asked me while I was teaching percussion, even at Skywriters in the middle of Iowa, whether I was going to be doing my job, like, no freaking way.
Yeah.
Didn't exist. Yeah. So, like, everybody listening or everybody doing their gig, you can either get into the mundane part of your job of like, okay, I gotta show up, I got percussion class at this, and I got freaking marching band. Like, you could either think of that as, an end. This is my life.
Right.
What's wrong with this, story? Or you could do what you guys are doing. Like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a podcast? Wouldn't it be cool if we just started this after school ensemble, or we got these kids together to, like, do these things, if your mind is constantly floating between, what would be cool? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? In my family life balance, I was really lucky that I worked at home the entire time they were growing up.
Yeah.
So I was constantly around. And my, because I'm ADD or whatever, my job isn't looking at a computer spreadsheet. It has flexibility that I could go sit on the patio, or I can hang out at a football game or whatever and watch my daughter cheer, or my son play in the marching band or whatever. I could go to things and I could still in my head be like solving problems or doing things like that. So my kids would probably go like, man, you were checked out a lot, but that is kind of that balance that you always have to, you have to work to achieve that as much as you work to achieve writing a book or teaching, the award-winning drumline or anything else. You have to work towards it. And the same thing, like I ride my bike, I do a ride for cancer every year that's about 200 miles, and I have to be prepared for that. So, I mean, that's one of the things that motivates me, So, all of these things, you have to set your priorities. You have to achieve that balance, but you have to work at it. It's not a, hey, I'm going to make a decision to, have a great family. That doesn't happen. There's no brass ring. It is a daily, every single day, the minute by minute decision you make is what results, not making the decision to do it.
So you're saying that doesn't just come easy?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does, because if you're excited about having a great family, then your family time is
super important.
Super easy.
Yeah.
It is super easy.
Yeah. Well, it's like if losing weight is actually very easy.
Yeah.
It's just you actually have to do the things every
Right.
time.
Yeah.
That's the hard. It's like we were just making a joke yesterday morning when I was stuffing French toast in my face. Like, if you're gonna go to working out is not hard. It's like the getting up and getting dressed and going to the gym.
Yeah.
That's the real hard.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part by far.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So just making a decision to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
We talked to our kids about that. I was like, listen, we've taught you, we've gotten a lot of accolades lately of kids playing really well. I'm like, we taught you in 6th grade how to read the rhythms and notes, and that's you already know that. Now you have to actually do it and keep grinding, keep doing it every day. It's pretty good. No, make it better. Oh, it's pretty good. No, make it better every day and every day. And that's what leads to those great performances that we're so proud of.
Yeah.
And it develops the culture, which is
Kind of
90% of great programs. When you really dig into it, you go to Chino Hills, you can go to Boston, you can go to Cadets, whatever. It's not only the instructors. I mean, instructors are fantastic. The kids are fantastic, but really it's the culture that they have, that they drive.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say, to circle all the way back to Zildjian and Vic, to find people that have the professional skill set or even the industry connections to do any job at Zildjian, unbelievably easy. There's trillions of them.
Yeah.
But who's going to fit in that culture?
Yeah.
Who's going to be a member of all that? You know what I mean? And that's the hard part. And sometimes it doesn't fit, and it's a mutual, this ain't working.
Yeah, right.
And they're like, yeah, I don't fit. You know what I mean? Sometimes that happens, but usually the vetting is pretty straightforward, So when the people join, Kyle Thomas, a good example, when he joined the team a couple years ago, it was like, wow, well, this guy has all the things we need. Let's hope this works out culture-wise, and it's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any final questions for them? I think we got to kind of wrap it up.
I think we got to wrap it up, yeah.
But guys,
Can I share one thing?
Please.
We talked about David Skidmore,
Yeah.
and we talked about the 400th. So real quick, the Friday night concert at PASIC this year, 2023.
Yes.
We got Mike Burrett, commissioned a piece with him to write a piece to celebrate Zildjian's 400th, and Third Coast Percussion is going to perform it.
Yes, we are super
So
excited
world
for
premiere of that. So that's something that's happening on the Friday night concert at PASIC. They just announced that. We've been talking about it for a year plus.
A lot of planning.
So as soon as they announced it, I was like, oh, thank God we can start talking about this.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome. Mark, anything else you want to kind of pitch and promote? We talked about your book. We talked about all the resources.
Yeah, I don't ever think about promoting it. I mean, I am the worst salesman ever. I do something and it's if it's good, people like it. If it's not, there's nothing I can tell them to make them want to do it. Check it out. If you like it, you could use pieces of it. I've already got the next 6 books in my head, and I'm working on the next 3 actively. So it is that level of it never stops, and I don't think that it will ever stop. We're in the parking lot going what can we do to make this better? Because everybody's filming. There needs to be a perspective that we could bring that nobody else can bring. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is.
I started laughing because the reason I laughed is because we literally did that. How can we make this better? With parking.
This could be.
This might be better. You know what? Yeah. No. The first draft was better. Let's do better. We did that with parking.
Yeah. There's the ADD. Well, you guys have been awesome to have on, and I think we've said more than any other podcast. This could be a whole other podcast. So I think we need to have you guys back on at some point. Maybe when you're back in Texas, we'll do a part 2. Brian Stockard and Mark Wessels episode, and just thank you guys so much for everything you do for our program, for us as educators, for the percussion community. Very, very, very thankful for all of your efforts.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us again for another awesome episode of Dream Job Podcast. Hopefully you guys like and subscribe and check us out on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcast, and TikTok as well. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks.
More coffee.